All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of The Common Theory. Of course, I'm your host, Chris, along with my man, Dallas. We have a very fun topic for you guys today. Essentially, aggro's been kind of like a very small archetype in our current meta, and we really want to delve into it. So, we're going to be doing a little class on aggro, essentially. What does it take for an aggro deck to succeed? What are the tools that an aggro deck has to have? And yeah, pretty much let's just jump on in. Dallas, you got anything for us, my bro?
Absolutely. So let's just go ahead and start by asking the question, what is aggro and what does it take for aggro to succeed in our format?
Yep. That's a very
Um,
interesting way to put it, my man, because our first deck is Gut and Inspiring Leader. So, what do you got for us with that?
yeah, so Gut with Inspiring Leader is a Boros aggro deck that is focused on using Gut to make 4/1 skeleton tokens with Menace, and Inspiring Leader to turn those into 6/3s, which, to be quite fair, seems very not amazing at first glance. I was pretty unimpressed with this card whenever I first saw it. Um, but the speed at which Gut is able to turn these out is one thing that really makes this deck of interest, in my opinion.
Yeah, and speaking of speed, because you brought it up, we're going to be kind of touching on three different aspects of these decks. So we essentially have three decks for you guys, and we'll be kind of delving into three certain things, which will be the speed, the synergies, and the closing power that these decks have to offer.
Yeah. So speed, I think, is the major de facto defining topic for aggro. Being able to consistently close the game out faster than other decks at the table or in the meta, I think, is what helps define a deck as an aggro deck, right?
Yep, definitely.
Um,
Well,
so
kind of speaking on that, you said the speed and the closing power, right? So they kind of go even hand in hand. But something I've have said in the past was because the turns have gotten lower and lower, I like an aggro deck to be able to, if this is, uninteracted, be at worst able to win the game by turn 8. How do you feel about that?
I think at worst eight,
Yes, at
yeah.
worst, turn
Um,
8, correct.
I would very much like to be able to consistently present wins by turn six,
Mm-hmm.
personally, just because of how fast combo is currently.
Yep,
Um, but yeah, if you're able to close out games at least by turn eight, it's not bad.
yep. Agreed. Um, so keep going with what you're doing, and I kind of want to bring out the elephant of the room as soon as you're done.
Absolutely, because obviously you are a bit more knowledgeable on this topic than I am. Um, but yeah, so Gut has a few tricks that help it play a faster game than a lot of other decks. One, the Menace is actually a big deal on these tokens.
Oh yeah,
It gives a form of evasion that either allows you to just get through guaranteed damage, which moves you towards your win condition, or you get a 2-for-1 with a token. Sure, it costs you a card to make, but that's kind of what the deck is made to do. So it's not that big of a deal, and it will typically get you 2-for-1s, especially if these are 6/3 skeletons.
oh yeah. They're just massive at that point.
And yeah, the card quality is one thing I kind of want to touch on
Mm-hmm.
because aggro decks don't always have the best card quality, right? Like,
Yep.
we're playing Chromatic Star and Voldaren Epicure, stuff like this. just really low to the ground stuff that just kind of replaces itself and doesn't do too much or just does one damage. Um,
Well, I mean that
but
does.
because of go ahead.
So, well, speaking of that, because you're saying card quality, it does feed into like the synergy of what the deck is trying to do, though, right?
Yep, absolutely. They lean a lot heavier into synergy, I think, than just generic card quality, right?
Yep, definitely,
Um,
definitely.
because that synergy is what powers the deck to be able to actually win the game quickly. Um,
Yes.
Gut being able to take a chromatic star on turn one and then any one or two drop on turn two to go turn three, gut, swing, sacrifice the chromatic star, draw a card, make a 4-1. Immediate pressure plus card advantage is very, very powerful, obviously.
Yep.
So, Gut's ability to do this consistently because of just how many of these, like, small, cheap 1 and 2 drop artifacts and creatures there are in our format is really, really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. It's notable to say because like this deck specifically plays so many cards. For instance, Grim Initiate, right? It's 2 for 1, so you get the an original Zombie Warrior, the 1/1, but then it becomes an army. Then you get the new Spear Guard, which is 2 and 1 again. Then you get Hunted Witness, 2 and 1 again. And I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Thraben Inspector. You already mentioned Voldaren Epicure. So this deck just continues to feed the gut, which I also want to bring up this. These decks, all three of these decks we'll be speaking about, are very, very good at mulliganing.
Yeah, just they're not looking for like 1 or 2 cards really. They're looking for 1 or 2 copies of a category of card, which is so much easier to find. Um, and they don't need much mana because that's what they're made to do. A lot of these decks will be on lower land counts than a lot of other decks in the format. Like
Yes.
this deck is on 32.
Yep.
Um, and we're sacrificing some of those lands
Yeah.
to gut because they're artifacts.
Yep. Exactly. We played the full suite. So,
But one thing I do want to mention is because our card quality is lower on the actual cards themselves and we're relying heavily on synergy, one common thing that aggro decks in the format currently struggle with is a extreme reliance on the commander.
mm-hmm.
Because yeah, like Voldaren Epicure or Impulsive Pilfer are just not good cards if we're not turning them into 4-1s with extra advantage, right?
Yep.
So we are really reliant on our commander, which is why in this list we're playing 15 pieces of protection.
Yeah.
Um,
Quite a bit. Quite a bit.
and and yeah, the nice thing about Gut is that these are really cheap. So after turn three, it's pretty difficult to remove Gut from the table. Maybe after turn four, if we're casting Inspiring Leader on four, there's one more window. But these are very early turns that the way that these aggro decks work, it kind of forces the meta to really respect the early game and play their early game interaction. Because if you don't, there is just no way you can beat this deck.
Yeah. So, something I really like about what you said is that Gut kind of has this awkward game plan, which is similar to where you get to kind of stop casting things because it's like you said, you're able to sacrifice these artifact lands. And you have for instance, let's go back up to this creatures here, the Thraben Inspector. So you got 2 permanents for the price of one, and everything just actually feeds the gut, right? You just have to have an attacking creature, and you need to be able to feed the gut. And the way this deck I've seen play many, many times is even on a mole, I've actually seen this and been in these games where someone will mull to 3, and I'm not the one playing gut. And they just mull to a creature, an artifact rock, and a land. And they top deck the land, they play the artifact, they curve gut on 3, and they are just off to the races. And you're just sitting there going, really? dude, you mull to 3 cards. Like, what is happening here? And everything off the top is just gas for gut. And you're like, well, I guess I'm forced to interact with this deck on a mull to 3. This is quite absurd. So, and also too, so jump into the synergy portion. I'd like to bring this up, kind of a small little tangent, if you don't mind. The goblin
Absolutely.
synergies, the tribal synergies, we could say. Specifically, goblins, in my opinion, are the number one strongest. Well, I said tribal, but tribal, I believe, is the way we're supposed to say it now. Is the strongest creatures we have in the format. What do you think about that?
I don't know about strongest creatures, but
Well,
it's a
no.
very powerful
I
synergy.
yeah, synergy wise, I don't mean like actually like the strongest creatures like in the format, like type, like tribal type, like everything they have, like so.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Goblins have so much support over the years, and they've always been very good at common. Um, very low rarity archetype. So
yeah. So
yeah, very good.
yeah, specifically like Goblin Matron, right? Like this is one of the few decks in the format that actually has an active tutor that's just readily available for it. And what I love about something like a Goblin Matron is that this card actually, in this deck specifically, gets you removal, gets you protection, gets you a wrath, or it just gets you draw power, or it even gets you bodies. Like this does so much in a deck like this. It's such a toolboxy feel. So, for instance, something that I think is quite notable is that Crib Swap and these changeling style cards like Shields of Velasfail are changelings and they are goblins. So you can actually actively tutor for these cards. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, especially Crib Swap, I think, is a very strong changeling card. Shields is a bit more tech, but we're playing a 2 toughness commander that has to stick. So having access to that to protect ourselves from 2 damage board wipes is pretty nice.
Yeah, notably, it also turns all of our creatures into all creature types. So, like Breath Weapon and Fiery Cannonade actually don't Wrath our field.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
it's got some cool synergy stuff.
yep. Actually, so here's a quick little fun story. I have to throw this out there because this is one of the coolest plays I think I've ever seen here with this deck. So there was Loyal Subordinate and Gut Leader at the same table. Other 2 decks don't matter here. And there was an active Shepherd of Rot. And the Gut player had 4 creatures in play. And one of the players was at 9. So the Shepherd of Rot went to be activated, and in response to the activation, the Gut player saw that if they shields themselves, that'll count for more zombies and it'll take out another player. So the Gut player actively shields themselves to cause 9 life to drain the entire table. It was really cool play. So,
Yeah, or you could use it to turn that reckless fireweaver into a pirate for someone else.
yep.
Um,
You can target anyone.
um,
That is kind of funny.
but
But
yeah, like it's just a solid deck. Once again, very reliant on the commander, so we are playing a lot of cards to protect our commander. But yeah, we're just trying to get down, get underneath all of these other decks, and at least take out the most problematic player for us fast, and then kind of just chip away at the rest with our residual board state.
yep. I mean, specifically, Gut by turn 5 will be able to take out 1 player if it is uninteracted with, because the math is easy as such, right? It's you get the 4 damage on 3, and then it's 8, and then it scales, and then you also get an inspiring leader
Yeah,
on
that's
5.
assuming there's no leader on 4.
Yeah, that's also assuming there's no leader on 4. So, but it is 30 damage by turn 5, which will take a player out. So it's, and that's without gut swinging or anything like that. So gut can actively be going at somebody else if you even choose to attack with gut. But let's delve into a couple little subjects before we move on to the next decks and actually delve a little bit deeper into gut and stuff like that. I wanted to bring up the elephant in the room if you're up for it.
Go for it.
All right. So the one thing that I think is very important about all three of these decks is that we need to, in my opinion, is as such, is aggro decks to be successful must be able to do the 90 damage to the table on their own. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, you already know my stance on this. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Um, we live in a world where combo is pretty good right now. Um, and you just can't rely on your opponents dealing damage for you. It's nice if they do, but realistically, it is not absurd to see yourself at a table with Malcolm, Gretchen, and Abdel, you know? Like, maybe they'll start doing some damage to each other eventually. Maybe there'll be a couple pingers, or Abdel will put down some 1/1s and deal some damage, but realistically, the burden of damage is on you,
Yep.
especially in the early game.
Well, I mean, your example was literally spot on, right? The last Sanctuary event where Dargo Kedis specifically wins that event, that exact pattern happens, including what we've spoken about in the past with a Weather the Storm went on the stack for 4. So that player, the Gretchen player, gained 12 life. So she had to deal the full amount, 90, plus some to the table. So it's it's I think your deck, and I don't really know how to say this in the nicest way, but you have to do 90 damage. There's no if, ands, or buts. Sure, there's so many decks that can incidentally damage you, right? With like these pinging effects and things of that nature. But life gain is real. I mean, there are actual life gain decks in the format, right? Like Viscopa and things of that nature. So, depending on your opponent, which I understand they are a resource and things like that, but your deck should be able to do what it's supposed to be doing instead of relying on the rest of the table.
Yeah, I mean, to put it quite simply, it's way easier for a deck capable of doing 90 damage to deal 60 than for a deck that's capable of dealing 60 to deal 90, right?
Yep,
So,
exactly.
yeah, we want to be able to make sure that we can get there in every scenario, and if there's life gain, we'll figure it out after we kill the other two, I guess.
Yep.
Um, or just take them out before they can gain life, one of the two.
Yep. I mean, that's
Um,
back to the speed factor, right? Like, we need to be aggressive. We need to be getting the job done. So, but,
but yeah, anything else you want to say on this deck? I know it is
well,
one of your babies.
I do love this deck, right? It is just slow to the ground. Recent includes this deck did have a little bit of a makeover here recently. I was working a lot with Aggro Aaron, and we were kind of bringing the deck back to its roots with more of the 2-for-1 package in the deck. Um, this is, in my opinion, if not the strongest standard bearer deck in the format, because standard bearer really, really slows your opponents down with this deck. And what you're able to actively do is you have cards like Collateral Damage, Reckless Abandon, and others that allow you to sacrifice a standard bearer when you no longer need it. And bring it back as well with cards like Recommission and a new include, which is Return Triumphant. So,
I think Teshar is the best at abusing standard bear, but
well, yes,
uh,
I do agree. So, yes, it is. But I'd like to see it start showing up more and more. I love the fact that
and the
Teshar.
card had just became legal.
Hey, hey, hey! Keep playing it, bro. Bring it. Start bringing it. Come on, work with me
I
here.
am. Look at the data, man. Got a good win rate.
uh,
Deck's all right.
yeah, I'm excited. I hope actually people start playing it and bringing it to events. I'll be really excited to see how it goes because Notably, there's two creatures in that deck that are shared also in Gut, which is the Suture Priest and the Standard Bearer, which essentially in Teshar, right, you cannot get those off the table pretty much ever. So
Yeah, I have won a few games by just going, all right, well, have fun playing around standard bearer, guys.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. So, but no, that's pretty much the gist I have about Gut. I mean, it's low to the ground. It's doing what it does. Um, One statement I enjoyed hearing, which I found to be a pretty spot on statement about this deck, was the PDH pod. I believe it was Brad specifically that stated this is a high octane deck list, low to the ground, it's just high octane. And I find that to be relatively pretty spot on of a description for this gut deck. So,
yeah, absolutely.
but yeah, let's move on. Let's delve into the next two decks, which we're moving on to Hungry Hungry Larry by Little Rad Lotad and Xrill, which is known as Jonathan in the community. So, specifically, our next two decks are Loyal Subordinate and Dargo Ketis. Now, these two decks specifically bring something that no other two decks in the format can do as an aggro deck. And that's why they're here. Is being able to beat all three players simultaneously. What do you think about that puzzle? What do you got for me about that?
I mean, yeah, the symmetrical nature of these commanders is really powerful as an aggressive deck because they are easily able to have the reach to eliminate all three players at once, similar to what the combo game plan is.
Yep.
Um, which is why I think combo is so powerful in our format, partially due to the fact that they don't have to have as much target priority. And the same is true for these decks, although they are still aggro decks. They use the combat phase, and that means you have to have some target priority.
Yes.
But
Agreed.
less so than gut, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
we're not
definitely.
taking out the problem player. We're going like, all right, everyone's taking like 6, 7, 10 damage, and then maybe someone else will take like an extra 2 or 3, you know?
Well, you kind of touch on something I wanted to bring up a bit later, but you kind of just said it. Was these decks are specifically gut is actually quite hard to pilot. That was something I wanted to touch back on a little bit later, but since you said it, cat's out the bag. I originally
It's true.
it is true, right? Because you have to know the metagame. You have to know why you're even attacking that player, right? Because you need to know why you even attack the Malcolm player to begin with, right? You just attack them because their deck is fast? No, you're attacking them because they have Fiery Cannonade and Breath Weapon. So they're the deck at the table that's going to wrath your field, right? Or you're sent across Gretchen. Gretchen's not doing that, right? Or you attacking the Tatiova. They gain life, but you could still race them. So there's certain things that you have to understand about the different archetypes to be successful with a deck like Gut.
Yeah, not quite to the extent of a control deck per se, or even some mid range decks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for aggro, especially gut specifically, you need to understand what everyone is doing at the table and how fast they're achieving that goal.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
'Cause, yeah, that really affects your target priority. But once again, that's the strengths of Loyal Subordinate and Dargo Ketis. They don't have to do that as much. They just kind
Exactly.
of throw themselves out there and go, all right, you're either all going to die or I'm not going to win this game.
Yep.
Uh,
And exactly that, right? And these decks are blistering fast. And they're I'd like to say it's like a make you have it deck, right? You show your opponent what you're doing at the beginning of the game, you make them have it, or they lose the game, right?
yeah, and I will say to that end, I do think these decks lack some of the resiliency that Gut can have,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not building up that same kind of board state and pressure that's completely agnostic of our commander existing. Our pressure mainly comes from the command zone in these decks.
Yes, correct.
Um, to a lesser extent in loyal subordinate, but still, a lot of our pressure is coming from our command zone here.
Yeah, something to note about loyal subordinate here, and I'm kind of going across the cards right now as we speak, and I'm just going to kind of like swing through these creatures as kind of touch base and kind of like let you guys see exactly what I mean by my statement. And it doesn't look like these numbers add up, but they are very relevant, especially a lot of the cards in the three of these decks don't look too impressive. Similar to what you were saying earlier, right? You were like, this is just a Voldaren Epicure. This is just a Chromatic Star, right? This is same with this deck, right? This is a Blood Pet. Like, this is not very impressive of a card. But when we slap them all together, we have this synergistic capabilities throughout the entire decks, right? And once again, we were talking about goblins and how powerful they are as a tribe, and now we have zombies, and notably Shepherd of Rot, just like I was mentioning earlier. So these cards, and let me just start with the full list, right? Cauldron Familiar, Maggot Carrier, Night Market Lookout. All of these cards have in common just a small amount of drain. Just comes into play, you lose one. Comes into play, you lose one. Attacks, turn sideways, you lose one. Serrated Scorpion. All of these creatures is just a little touch at a time. Just a little bit here, a little bit there. Basilica Screecher. Just another extort you for one, right? And it doesn't appear as though that adds up, but it does. And I mean, you've played against this deck, so what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially, specifically, one of the lines that this deck has access to, um, being able to go Dark Ritual into Loyal Subordinate turn one. Like, it's insane. And you're almost guaranteed to get 9 damage to each player out of that play,
Yeah.
before anyone's able to respond to it reasonably. Um, so that line specifically is extremely powerful, and the deck's pretty consistent at casting Subordinate on turn two, um, as well, which is still very powerful.
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of these little drain effects are so absurdly unimpressive. It's like it's not worth bolting a maggot carrier, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a
It's like a
1/1.
joke, right? Like, why
It,
would you
it
even
does
do it?
literally nothing.
Yep.
Um, but it did its job. It's a bad Voldaren Epicure, but notably, like you said, it's a zombie, and this deck does care about that.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, they really do add up, as unimpressive as they may seem. I was not a believer in this deck for a long time because I was like, these cards are so bad. Like, why?
Yeah.
you know? Um, but yeah, it's proven to me at least that it is fast enough to make up for the lack of card quality. Because yeah, like this deck, especially if subordinate like dies before it gets a combat step, and then you have to pay 5 for this thing, especially if you ramped it out on turn 1 or turn 2 with rituals, like the deck is gonna struggle. Um, but yeah,
Well, what I like
when it
about like
works, it works.
well, kind of what I like about like this deck and like Gut and just the three of these decks, right? They all have measures to prevent these kinds of like blowouts, right? It's just like you said, oh, they took the loyal subordinate off the table. Well, guess what? I have Ghoul Caller's Chant. I get two zombies back, right? I have Unearth. I bring the loyal subordinate right back for 1 mana, right? I have so many rituals, right? From Culling the Weak to Cabal Ritual to Dark Ritual. I mean, literally, the deck plays all of them. This deck is so far in the tank, it's actually playing Bubbling Muck, right? That's a card you never see in
I
other
mean, I don't
decks,
think that card's insane in mono black aggro, but I
but it
think it's
works.
a, I think it's a very obvious choice
Yeah.
for this kind of deck.
Yeah. Agreed, agreed.
But yeah, still, like deck is not bad. We're on Darkness, which is kind of funny for an aggro deck because we are looking to use it more proactively than reactively. If you want to talk about that, because I know you love that about Fogs.
I do actually. So something I've learned throughout the entire metagame and everything like that is fogs are a lot more powerful than perceived, and they're more powerful in decks that are attacking. And what I mean by that is that initially fogs were perceived to go into control decks, which is false because what happens in a control deck? You're just sitting waiting and waiting and waiting to be attacked. And not everything attacks. It's just like you said, we have all of these combo decks. So if they never attack you, you have a dead card. But these aggro decks are blitzing you. They are going to you as fast as possible. So they're using these fogs, exactly like you said, proactively. They're like, I'm going to throw my whole board state at just you. If the other two players want to capitalize and try to hit me back, let them. But just note, when you swing at me all the way, I'll darkness you, and now I get a full swing at you now. So it's like this weird game of like possum almost, to where it's like, do I have the darkness? Do you want to try it? I just swung my whole board at this one player. Do you feel lucky today? Similar to like Gut, right? Gut has Kami of the False Hope. So it just sits in play, and it has the two reanimation spells. So it's just like, do you really want to go against Gut with these attack triggers? Like, it's quite difficult to read these aggro decks when they're just onslaughting a single player, and you're like, okay, if I swing at them and they have it, we're dead. So, kind of my 2 cents on that. I love the fogs. I mean, if you cannot tell, I absolutely love these fogs. So,
Yeah, for sure. Um, Trying to see. We are playing a few discard effects in this list as well.
I
Um,
actually quite love these, by the way. So, this is a new include. These hand destruction effects are recent includes by Jonathan. So, if you notice, just like Gut, it was two players, and just like this deck, it's also two players came together to create this list. And what is it? What is the word that they used? These aggro decks typically players attempt to 3v1 them, right? Or you're 3v1ing them. So what can you do to stop them from interacting with your cards? And one thought was, well, hand destruction.
I get it. I don't like it as much. Um, so okay. I like it when the deck is working. I think they're horrendous when you get stopped and interacted with.
Yeah,
Um,
bad from behind.
because you're not the responsible deck, right? Like you have some
Correct.
interaction obviously because you're a competitive deck, but wow, if you cast these and then someone just like removes your commander in response,
Yeah, you're hurting.
like that's -1 interaction from another player. You're dropping 6 cards from the table.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If that combo player has combo in hand, like the game's over.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, you know. But yeah, when you are like, if you're on a roll and you just go, all right, my hand's already empty, delirium skeins, um, and I'm the problem, you know.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah. I I like these effects. I do agree that if you're behind, these don't help you get back ahead. But that's not what this deck's trying to do, right? It's trying to come out ahead and stay ahead, right? Not you come back, right? So this deck tries to oppressively keep you down and leave you there. So I really appreciate that play pattern, as awkward as it is.
Yeah, I don't
So
know if I want to call them win more, necessarily,
it's like the last
but
nail in the coffin. right?
Yeah, it's like the seal the deal card, you know, like if
Exactly.
you couldn't stop me now, like game over.
Yep.
Uh, so I don't hate him.
So, well, let's move on to the last deck, Dargo Kedis. So, this is a deck very close to my heart, and this is the oldest of the three. So, this deck was one of the first builds that I had done very long time ago. And I actually built this deck originally for my daughter. This is the deck I actually got her in the format with. So let's just start with you, man. I know you, of the three decks, you actually play this one. And you've been playing it for
That's
quite a
true.
bit now. So let's head out with you, man. What are your thoughts on a deck like this?
Had to finish my drink before I talk about this.
Uh oh.
Uh,
Uh oh. Well, remember, this deck attacks. I know how you feel about attacking.
it does. I despise the combat step, but yeah. I mean, this deck is very fast and very consistent. Um, Even more so than the other two decks. This deck's win condition is the command zone. Um, we have a couple other ways to win the game, but not really. You know, um, our main win condition is cast Dargo, cast Kedis, is something something win the game. Um,
Perfect
and
description.
that's yeah, that's just what this deck does. It's generally consistent at getting out turn two Dargo. Turn three Dargo most assuredly. It mulligans well. We're playing 29 pieces of fodder in this deck. Like we just kind of do the thing. Um, Unlike the other decks, we don't have as many pieces of protection because we're mono red. So we don't have white for protection pieces and interaction. We don't have black for reanimation and interaction. We have a decent amount of interaction still. We have red removal and things of that nature. But wow, we do not really protect our commander. Instead of protecting our commander, our goal is to establish our board presence, get one or two attacks in, and then if we get interacted with, we just cast Dargo again. Maybe give him haste and pretend he was never removed, you know? Um, so this deck just wants to keep applying pressure and forcing answers from other people until you win the game, or you know, you throw the game to the combo deck. Um,
I mean,
those are really the two options.
this deck is really good against counter spells. Specifically, you can really well. Let me rephrase my statement. Dargo is really good against counter
Yeah.
spells. So that was actually something that happened in the finals where Caitlyn specifically used me as a punching bag in the finals when I was playing Malcolm Kedis. And I had a grip of counter spells. And at one point in the game, I actually Gitaxian probed Ankylosaur. And what I ended up seeing was a grip of counter spells. And I had a grip of counter spells. And we already had the Dargo active and going. And we both kind of looked at each other and were like, you can't get this off the table. He's like, nope. I'm like, I can't get this off the table. We both just kind of knew at that point we were dead. I mean, there was no getting away from the Dargo. It's so fast, and because the format is 16 commander damage, wow, is it so hard to fight a Dargo running at you?
Yeah, and I mean, when like you mentioned, it's good against counter spells, so it has that strength against blue, and it's also extremely resilient against red decks and damage based removal. So it's good against Is It, which
Yeah.
is nice. It struggles against bounce. Bounce is problematic, to be quite fair. Um, we can just recast Dargo, but like it costs us some board state and some tempo to do so. We lose out on combat phases, all that stuff. It's annoying, and can slow us down a significant amount. Um, but also, another reason this deck is very good against counter spells is just read Dargo, you know? Um,
Read the
his
card.
cost is reduced for the rest of the turn. So I've had games where like Dargo gets killed. So the next turn I go, all right, sack 4 artifacts, cast Dargo for 1. Ah, cool counter spell. Anyways, that resolves. Sacrifice my Ketis, pay 1 more mana, cast Dargo.
Yep.
Um, he still cost 1, like, um,
Yeah,
so the deck is very doing that.
it's pretty ridiculous. Like the way Dargo really is, it's just blitzing you. And it's kind of funny because you already said it, right? It's what does this deck do? Oh, it gets bounced. Oh, guess what? We just give them haste and pretend like that never happened, right? That's exactly what this deck does. And notably, I keep referring to the finals because of the three of these, this is the only one that has won an event. And notably, this is the only aggro deck that has won an event total. Everything else has been combo. So, in that match, exactly what you're saying kind of happened. The Dargo got bounced, spell bombed, right? Then we had the Echoing Truth. So what little removal we had kept going at the Ketis and then the Dargo, and people were kind of picking and choosing when to bounce the Ketis, so then the Dargo still hit the player, and then bounce the Dargo if the Dargo was coming at you. And you kind of, once again, you have to be able to navigate to know who's going to be the one to remove the Ketis so you still get to hit the other player with the Dargo if that opportunity happens.
Yeah, that's always a fun balance to watch the combo players try to figure out, Like, do I let the Dargo resolve? Do I let the Ketis resolve? Do I bounce the Dargo or the Ketis,
Yep.
Is the Dargo coming at me? If yes, then bounce Dargo. Um, but if no, you have a choice to make. Do
Yep.
you take 7 to make sure everyone else takes 7 and somebody takes commander damage? And maybe they die to Buccaneers Bravado on turn 3, Like, maybe. Um,
Well, what all three of these decks are made to do is top deck you out of the game. I have seen games where you're playing late at night. I'm just kind of spectate. Well, I am literally spectating you play. You run out the Dargo on turn 3. You're like, here's my turn 4. Kedis hits you, and then the next turn you're empty-handed, and you're like, oh look, I top deck Buccaneers Bravado. You're like, attack, kill the table, and the table's like, oh, well, that was a fast game, I guess. Like, like, what do you do to that, right?
yeah,
Like, it's just disgusting. Like the double striking Dargo is just it's Dargo, right? What more can you say about a Dargo?
yeah. No, it's really funny to be able to just tell people, "Oh, guys, I have no cards in hand, man. All I can do is just punch someone, and then you kill someone. Maybe you kill someone else, and then you top deck Goblin Grenade, and it's like
Boom.
I thought I was safe because I was out of bolt range. Like I can deal with the Dargo, and I'm at 5. Um, I'm
Yep.
safe, right? No, Goblin Grenade, sack my token. Uh, Good game,
Yep.
Like
Yeah. See,
it just
that's
has so many top decks. Yeah.
yeah, and exactly that, right? Just like Loyal Subordinate, this deck is doing the same thing, right? Once again, if Dargo goes away, and it's kind of funny. So I'll finish this, and then I'm gonna hit the next little topic here. This deck has Blister Spit Gremlin, Sawblade Scamp, Impact Tremors. It has all these cards that do like global damage, right? Firebrain Archer. So you get these small little pokes, and people are like, "Oh, this isn't adding up." But then they kill your Dargo, and you recast the Dargo, and you get an Impact Tremors trigger. But then they kill the Dargo, and you re-put them back in play, and these triggers start happening and
Dude,
happening and happening.
Impact Tremors is the most annoying card in this deck to play against, I swear.
Yes, It
Like
is
so
hilarious.
many games, I'll be playing combo against this deck, and it's like I can't win the game because there is an impact trimmers, and if
Yep.
I kill the Dargo, I die to impact trimmers, and if he
Yep.
top decks a creature, I die to impact trimmers,
Yep.
and like, and if he swings at anyone else, there's a Ketis, and I die to
Yeah.
impact trimmers, and if I bounce the Ketis, he casts the Ketis, and I die to impact trimmers, and it is just the most aggravating thing to deal with. I swear.
Yeah. I mean, considering also too, you have like Mog War Marshal. You get the 2 tokens. You get the 3 bodies for 1 card. Then you get Koldatha Rebirth. 3 bodies for 1 card. So you're just bolting your opponents. And like that's kind of what this deck is doing. And it's like you said, it's annoying. Because it just keeps happening and you can't stop it with your bounce spells. You're not actually time walking them. You're helping them kill you. And it's very,
Yeah.
very
And like,
annoying.
are we really countering impact trimmers when there's a Dargo? Like,
Yeah,
it's yeah, like the deck just has so many threats, and some of them don't seem like threats, but they all are.
yep, exactly. Like there's so much haste enabling in this deck that you can't really get away from the blitzing Dargo, from Bitter Reunion, Dragon Breath, Crimson Wisp, Expedite. I mean, there's just I mean, it goes so far in the tank that you have Torch Courier, just literally a tutorable haste enabler for Dargo,
The
right?
goblins coming back.
I mean, they're just it's the deck's very annoying. It is very, very annoying, ironically enough. But on that, let's delve into one last topic so we don't go too long here with all this. Um just like we were saying, right? These 3 decks specifically were kind of like the 3 decks that we wanted to touch upon that have shown success in our format as a whole, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I've really appreciate seeing these 3 decks kind of out in the wild. Have you ever been at a table with 2 of these decks?
I think I've played against Gut and Dargo Kedis a couple times at the same table,
Oof.
and dear lord, it is not fun. Um, like, yeah, it's like playing against 2 turbo combo decks, you know? It's like, I can stop one of them, but put the two together, they, like, you're really gonna need help from that fourth player, you know? You just
Yeah.
can't handle them both.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, this was kind of wanted a lot of what I wanted to touch on with you specifically, just kind of talking about why these decks are here and why they're kind of here to stay, right? It was just kind of what we were touching upon how like Dargo could just randomly kill you on turn 3 with a Buccaneer's bravado, right? Like it just takes out the problematic player, just like Gut kills you on turn 5. Low Subordinate kills you on turn 5, right? It's just these decks are so fast, they're so low to the ground, they have these weird cards that are like funky. Like it is it even worth countering, right? On turn you curve out turn 2 gener- generator servant. Are you actually countering that just like you said? Or are you countering the Malcolm? Right? Like why are you countering Sting Scourger? Right? Like these cards are just not that great on the surface, but when you put them all together like this, wow, are they annoying. So, you got anything else for them?
Um, I mean, the other thing for Dargo, specifically with like the double striking stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is it's really funny after a player knows that that interaction exists, like
Oh.
after you hit it with them a couple of times, and they go turn 3 Malcolm, and you go, okay, my turn 3 swing Dargo at you, and watching people make the decision of do I block with Malcolm to not die to Buccaneers bravado is it will never get old.
Yeah.
Luckily, I play Gretchen, so I just block with Gretchen every time because I'm just not going to take the risk. Um, and it saves the table damage, which I like in Gretchen because I want the table to exist.
Yep.
But yeah, some decks really struggle with that decision. You know, it's
Agreed.
very difficult.
Well, yeah. I mean, I like these decks. I like the fact that aggro exists. Um, like I, the big
It is
topic.
healthy for the meta.
Oh
That's
yeah,
my
it is very healthy for the
opinion.
meta. All three of these decks, they have one thing in common. You must interact with them. If you choose to not interact with these decks, they will beat you. This is not. You cannot ignore these decks if they're sitting at the table with you. They will make it a point to make you interact with them. Is really what they do. And once again, I'm gonna beat this into the ground, you guys. Beating this into the ground. These decks can do 90 plus damage to the table. Solid, no ifs, no ands, no buts. If you want your aggro deck to succeed, your baseline has to be 90 damage.
Absolutely.
So, anything else from Puzzle? Are we good to go, my bro?
I'm good to go. Are you?
I am good to go, my man.
Alrighty, I'll go ahead and close this out then. That concludes our masterclass on aggro decks in competitive Pauper Commander. Just as a reminder, we now have a Patreon up, so if you want to support us on over there, get access to our Discord, get access to some coaching if you want. We offer coaching, but link to that will be in the description. And while you're down there, go ahead and leave a like, leave a comment, let us know what you think about this video, and subscribe if you aren't already. And I hope you all have a nice day.